This is about the debt of the United States. The fact that we're borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days, it can't go on. And so this institution, as long as I've been here, has been trying to do something about it. We have tried over and over and over again to make something happen.
Why should we bother coming to an agreement on appropriations here in the Senate, pass a law, send it to the president, he signs it, and then in the next Congress and the next president, they can shut it down and claw it back? It gets to the very question of the power of the purse.
But the greatest national security threat Americans face is our skyrocketing national debt. President Trump agrees with us and is committed to do something about this. We must confront this, and to do so, hard choices are going to have to be made, and all parts of government will have to be looked at very closely.
We should not shut down our assistance to the world in a way that creates this vacuum. Who wins is the first question. My concern is our adversaries. Mr. President, as if in legislative session and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of Senate Resolution 51, which was submitted earlier today. Further, that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objections? Recognize the senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I want to rise today to talk about what Senator Coons is attempting to do here. And I have to say that a lot of us have said for years that the greatest national security threat Americans face is our skyrocketing national debt. President Trump agrees with us and is committed to do something about this. We must confront this, and to do so, hard choices are going to have to be made, and all parts of government will have to be looked at very closely. The idea of merging USAID and the State Department is not new and has been floated by nearly every administration since the latter part of the last century. I'm supportive of the Trump administration's efforts to reform and restructure the agency in a way that better serves United States national security interests. I'm fortunate enough to talk with Secretary Rubio virtually daily, sometimes multiple times a day, and I was aware this was coming. And as I said, I have encouraged that this be looked at. Today, along with a number of my colleagues on relevant committees on both sides of the aisle and the Hill, received notification that Secretary Rubio is beginning the process of merging USAID into state. I had received this informal notice earlier than this. There's a lot of work to do in this effort, and there is a process set up for doing this. And Secretary Rubio is following that process and looks forward to working with all of us as he goes through that process. It's my hope that all of my colleagues in both parties will help to do this important work. I have to say that this is just one agency. There are many, many, many agencies out there, and this is going to be coming down the pike on every amount of government spending. Elections have consequences, and this is one of the consequences that we're going to do our best to reduce spending, do it by efficiencies, by combining where it's necessary. I'll continue to be in close coordination with Secretary Rubio on this as it moves forward. As a result of that, I object to the proposed RS 51.
The objection is heard. Senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, if I might further expound on the resolution and respond to the comments by my colleague, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee on which I serve. The resolution I sought to advance today is a simple statement of fact. It reviews the history of USAID, its creation as an independent agency, and its recognition in a law I helped write just last year, that to reorganize it explicitly requires congressional consultation and notification in advance. And the statement of the resolution, the core point of it, is that AID is central to advancing the national security of the United States, because it mitigates threats abroad before they reach us here, it promotes global stability, it addresses the root causes of migration and extremism, and secures the leadership and influence of the United States in an era of strategic competition with the People's Republic of China. Let me speak to a few points, if I might. The power of the purse, process matters, 1%, and who wins. Rolling back the decades of work and relationships that the nonprofits and AID do around the world is creating a vacuum that will be filled by bad actors. So in a country where we've long funded the PEPFAR program, started by President Bush, long supported on a bipartisan basis, that provides antiretrovirals and testing and nurses and support and clinics, to abandon that, to defund that, to shut that down, simply creates an opening for a bad actor to come in and say, the Americans abandoned you. Sorry for your luck. Here we are. We want to help. The Chinese have invested hundreds and hundreds of billions in advancing their interests through investing in infrastructure, building partnerships in critical minerals, becoming the leads on port operations, and delivering humanitarian aid. We should not shut down our assistance to the world in a way that creates this vacuum. Who wins is the first question. My concern is our adversaries. Second, process matters. As those of us who are lawyers know, it's backwards to start with an executive order that shuts down the funding for an organization and an entity, to invade and occupy its headquarters, to have an unelected department get into its systems, to lay off and furlough its senior leadership, and then notify Congress of the intent to begin a conversation about reorganization. I welcome a chance to have a conversation about the future of our development assistance around the world, and my hope is that it will continue, because I have case after case to review here about the good work it does. But to shut down the funding and to cause lots of our partners to lay off their key staff and then begin a conversation about reorganization is to get it backwards in terms of process and the law. I'm an appropriator. Why should we bother coming to an agreement on appropriations here in the Senate, pass a law, send it to the president, he signs it, and then in the next Congress and the next president, they can shut it down and claw it back? It gets to the very question of the power of the purse, which in Article 1 of the Constitution is the power of this body. Going forward, of course, as my colleague said, elections have consequences. It is true that President Trump and the new majority here will put their imprimatur on the policy priorities across a wide range of agencies and programs. Absolutely. And I expect that discussion and that fight. But this is reaching back and shutting down. 1%. 1%, actually less than 1%, of the total federal budget goes to these vital humanitarian programs around the world. I'll give you a few examples of what has been stopped in its tracks. A U.S. organization funded through AID has stopped its counterterrorism work in the Philippines that was reducing the appeal of terrorist recruitment and radicalization. We've walked away from that work. In Mexico, an organization that reduces the number of children recruited by gangs to help move drugs and migrants across our border has had its funding cut off. I remember trips that I took by partisan delegations I was a part of that went and visited AID-funded work where folks were delivering critical care. St. Mary's Clinic in Kibera, in Nairobi, in Kenya, one of the worst informal settlements, slums I've ever been in my life. And these dedicated, caring, capable folks delivering vital life assistance. In Liberia during Ebola, I will never forget meeting with the nurses, the doctors, the volunteers, the Liberians who were helping save lives. Why does this matter? Today, there's an Ebola outbreak in Kampala, Uganda. There's a Marburg outbreak in Tanzania. And it's the disease monitoring and testing It's the clinics and the nurses that keep these diseases controlled and managed on the other side of the world before they come here. Failing to sustain this work in an efficient and effective way is to fail to show the values of the United States, is to show we're not a reliable partner, is to show that the decades of bipartisan support for critical initiatives like PEPFAR have been abandoned because they're no longer considered a smarter strategic investment by one party while the other party will fight for it. My fondest hope is that we will yet find there is bipartisan support for continuing and sustaining these investments. But it's unclear because the unelected leader of DOGE, Elon Musk, is even now tweeting, shut it down, close it off. My hope is that Secretary Rubio's comments today on television about sustaining many of the critical functions of AID will win out, but I'm not confident because it's unclear to me who's really driving this initiative. Let me close. We know that diplomacy and development stand alongside defense in being critical to our national security. President Trump's first defense secretary, General James Mattis, said to us in a hearing that if foreign aid were to get cut, he would need to buy more bullets. Because foreign aid around the world helps us build relationships of support, combat terrorism and extremism, advance our values and priorities, and make us safer and more secure. I cannot think of a more troubling development than this long-trusted, capable, bipartisan effort at helping bring our values to the world and helping secure our nation would be cut off abruptly, roughly, in a way that violates the law and the spirit of our long bipartisan compromise. Who wins? If we do, in fact, shut this all down, it's our adversaries. It's terrorists, it's drug cartels, it's Russia, it's China. It's those we've held at bay through the great work of this organization and its dedicated servants for decades. My hope is that even though this resolution was opposed and thus defeated tonight, that the determination to support this great work will survive and thrive and prevail. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor.
Recognize the senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, first of all, to my good friend from Delaware, I know that he is aware that a number of the programs here have already received a waiver because a case was made for those programs, and that's appropriate. But look, as I started to say at the beginning, this is about the debt of the United States. The fact that we're borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days, it can't go on. And so this institution, as long as I've been here, has been trying to do something about it. We have tried over and over and over again to make something happen. What do? We create a study group. Study group sits down, they talk for 2 years, they create a great big report, and nothing ever comes of it. This president is making things happen. And one of the agencies that a lot of us have had concerns about over the years is USAID and how the money was being spent. We're going to have a look at it. And I have no doubt that when we're done with that, everyone's going to have a say. And at the end of the day, we will, as we do in a democracy, vote, and that'll be the end of it. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Senator from Delaware.
If I might, one of my own pressing concerns I've raised with colleagues here on the floor tonight is that even in cases where Secretary Rubio has given a waiver to try and keep programs like PEPFAR going, money is not flowing. And several Republican senators have posted and spoken to this issue today. If Secretary Rubio is in charge of this initiative, those waivers should lead to funding being restored. If he's not, if this is really Elon Musk's vision of shut it all down, then what is happening on the ground today in country after country will show us where we are really headed, which is the complete abandonment of our global leadership in humanitarian relief and development. I pray that we can work together to ensure that the critical work of dozens of household name nonprofits is not abandoned, and that what is left of AID is not allowed to bleed out while we here in the Senate debate. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.